morning everyone. So for today's video, we'll be discussing the basic principles of forensic chemistry as a tool of criminal investigation. First and foremost, forensic. It is related to scientific methods of solving crimes involving examining the objects or substances that are involved in a crime. Chemistry, the science that deals with the properties, composition, and structure of substances defined as elements and compounds, the transformations they undergo, and the energy that is released or absorbed during these processes. Forensic chemistry is the analytic study of substances that could easily be misidentified or confused, and finding their unidentified forensic and chemical properties of different materials in order to identify them correctly where one or more materials may have similar properties. Crime investigation are still investigate techniques that have been developed over time for all types of crime, answering the questions of who, where, when, why, what, and how.
Forensic chemistry was once the foundation of crime laboratory. Forensic chemistry is becoming an increasingly popular topic. It is being used quite often in the real world with police investigations, cases, and is also being magnified in television shows including Forensic Files, CSI, and Ghost. Forensic chemistry is important because without it, we wouldn't know the outcome of the crime. The forensic chemist's job is to examine evidence given to them from a crime scene, when it happened, and even who committed the crime at times. Forensic chemistry deals with the chemical analysis of a variety of types of physical evidence. This includes glass, fragments, suspected accelerants from arson debris, gunshot residue on the hands on a shooter, blood stain, fibers, drugs, and even sample of hair. Forensic is the basis of the crime-fighting unit. It is devised to assist in the solving of crime by providing explicit and reliable evidence. Forensic chemistry is applied chemistry in a legal environment. Experts in this field have a wide range of methods and instruments to help identify unknown substances. The range of different methods is important because of the destructive nature of some instruments and the number of possible unknown substances that can be found at the scene. Chemical physical expertise has a continuous tradition that stretches back several decades. The application of chemical principles and procedures to the field of forensic inquiry constitutes the specialty of forensic chemistry. Forensic chemistry plays a huge part in criminal investigation, from methods for gathering and preserving evidence to intricate chemical processes for identifying components and compounds.
The basic principles of forensic chemistry are the specimen that will be inspected must first be collected. The investigation of the crime requires adequate specimen collection, preservation, and the transportation. So, whenever possible, the chemist should gather all the specimen required for the examination themselves. When gathering samples for analysis, there are some things to keep in mind. The first is the sufficiency of samples. The evidence of specimen that has been gathered must be adequate rather than insufficient, since the chemist will examine the specimen more than time in order to conduct an accurate inspection. The first step is to carefully examine it and record the sealing details in the laboratory logbook. Measure of weight the item in the second step and record all measurements and weight in the lab logbook. The third stage of the laboratory evaluation includes the confirmatory physical and chemical testing. The result of examination conducted should be communicated with the requesting party in the form of written report, which must include an enumeration of facts of the specimen received for examination with a detailed description of the packaging, sealing and labeling, date of receipt and from whom it was received, the purpose of the examination, the finding and conclusion. If the case is presented to the court of the fiscal office, the written report of the forensic chemist is physically supplemented by testimonial evidence at the later time. It is acceptable and even necessary for the chemist to review his laboratory record book before testifying in a court because the testimonial evidence may be provided weeks, months, or even years after the examination and written report have been made.
Uses of scientific evidence. Uses of scientific evidence, you may be wondering what on earth scientific evidence could mean. In general, scientific evidence is based on knowledge that has been developed by using the scientific method. This means that the basis of the evidence has been hypothesized and tested and generally accepted within the scientific community. This could mean that the theory of which the scientific evidence is based has been published in scientific journals and been subjected to peer review within scientific community. Generally, many types of forensic evidence are often considered scientific evidence like DNA matching, fingerprint identification, and hair fiber evidence. The methods used to develop this type of evidence are generally beyond the scope of knowledge that judge and juries possess and are therefore normally introduced as scientific evidence.
Scientific evidence can be used in criminal investigation and trial of criminal court. In criminal investigation, it helps improving the ongoing investigation and minimize error with fast, precise, and accurate examinations. While on the trial of criminal cases, in general, scientific evidence are the result of scientific tests used to prove or disprove a theory or hypothesis. In criminal cases, scientific evidence is used to help jury to understand and determine the facts of the case. A court's rule of evidence will guide how scientific evidence can be introduced in court. And most time, it will be done through an expert witness. Scientific evidence in law is considered to be opinion evidence, which means it is evidence presented in court by a witness of what he or she believes to be true in regard to the facts of the case. Expert witnesses are asked to come to court based on their skills, knowledge, or expertise to introduce their expert opinion of scientific evidence in a case, establish its reliability, and to help jury in their understanding of that piece of scientific evidence.
The type of evidence in legal court case. There are several types of evidence. First is the physical evidence, also called real evidence. Actual tangible evidence that can be touched and pick up that is relevant to the case. Demonstrative evidence, evidence that requires a demonstration such as a chart or a video. Testimonial evidence, also called personal evidence, evidence brought forth by witnesses such as a testimony. While the documentary evidence, this evidence is documents like wills, letters, and other documentations. Although also physical and type is a section in its own category, we're going to focus on physical evidence, which is any evidence that is physical and found at the scene. There are other smaller categories of physical evidence as well, such as digital evidence, which refers to computer evidence, which has become more and more important as the computer and social media. Exploratory evidence can be any of the previous types of evidence, but it must be evidence that shows the innocence of the defendant. And lastly, there is scientific scientific evidence like DNA, it would also fall under the category of physical evidence, but it is scientific as well. Physical evidence can include anything from objects like the murder weapon, the blood, the splatter, the DNA, even the fingerprints. Although you cannot hold fingerprints, they still can be pulled out of a wall and turned into physical evidence. For the jury and legal representation to review, their evidence is then used to present cases for or against a defendant, as long as the evidence has been approved by the judge. So during the examination of the crime scene or after a crime, everything that may be tied to the investigation is taken into custody to determine whether it pertains to the case. It is then taken back to a lab or station to be analyzed. The police will need to make sure to keep a lot of the evidence on file so that there is no chance of evidence tampering which can affect the credibility of the trial.
How to retrieve physical evidences. How to retrieve physical evidence. The investigator needs to consider that physical evidence may exist that is relevant to the case. NHRIS may need to seek expert assistance when collecting and storing physical evidence. Collecting evidence at a scene requires planning and specialized skills. The physical evidence is anything tangible, that is, anything that can be touched or held that may have some relevance to the investigation. It could be a sample of earth from the banks of polluted river. It might be a computer hard drive or the SIM card from a mobile phone. It could be cartridge cases found at the site of mass grave or fragment of a bone. It is relevant to the issue being investigated and it is evident.
Take photographs and video everything as you find it. Prepare a detailed diagram of the scene. Measure distance to record the scale of the scene and the relative position in different items of evidence. Always wear gloves when touching or handling an item. Bag any item that may be relevant, one item at a time, and seal a bag. Do not put items together the same.
Historical development of crime laboratory, international and local. Crime laboratories. In 1910, Professor Edmond Locard, 1877 to 1966, of the University of Lyons, France, established the first crime lab based upon the idea that criminals leave behind traces of themselves with every crime. Using Locard's principles, Los Angeles, California, Police Chief August Vollmer, 1875 to 1955, established one of the first modern crime laboratories in the United States in 1923.
The Division of Scientific Service. Prior to 1999, the State Police Forensic Sciences Laboratory was the only legislative recognized crime laboratory in Connecticut. In 1999, responding to an instance of the crime justice community that crime laboratories be utmost and independent of law enforcement in their interpretations and examinations of physical was already playing a pivotal role in criminal prosecution across the nation. Public Safety Commissioner Dr. Henry C. Lee bifurcated the Forensic Science Laboratory from the Division of State Police and established the Crime Lab under the newly formed Division of Scientific Service. The Forensic Science Laboratory in 1935, Connecticut State Police Commissioner Anthony Sunderland established a Bureau of Identification within the Department of State Police. Fingerprint and mugshot files were created for a major case. In 1975, the crime laboratory was made an independent unit within the Department of State Police. The humble beginning of the State Crime Lab was in the forensic space, which was the converted main room inside the Thorpe and Brooks and Brittany, Connecticut.